Work Integrated Learning and Career Hubs. The panelists are Professor Hester Klopper, Vice Chancellor and Principal at the University of the Free State. Professor Gary Martin, CEO at the Australian Institute of Management, Western Australia. Naomi Graham, Vice Principal for International and External Relations at Edinburgh Napier University. Shweta Wahi, Managing Director Operations at Transnational Academic Group. Professor Simon Guy, Pro Vice Chancellor Global at Lancaster University. And the moderator is CNBC Africa anchor Zanele Morrison.
Thank you so much for joining us once again. I think it's going to be really quite an insightful hour. It is an hour long, so I really want to start off by allowing each of my panel members to just delve into what is the burning platform for them when they consider this particular topic. And I think I can't see the order with which you sit. If you're with me, I'd be able to see which order you are sitting with. But it's really looking forward to, I think, just asking you to go first, and we'll navigate as we go along as I get to see the order of your seating engagement. Professor Hester Klopper, perhaps we can start with you. You know, for you, when you came on board this morning, what is it that you were inspired to share as your burning platform?
Well, good morning, Zanele, and everyone joining. Good to join you here from the University of the Free State. So, universities find themselves at a pivotal moment in terms of higher education globally, and it's really defined by the rapid global change that we are seeing, the evolving economic landscapes, and then the urgent call for universities to adapt, to innovate, and to lead, and to stay relevant. And as we engage in this, what the future looks like, what we hear from employers is that they are seeking graduates that are really professionals, that are equipped not merely with the theoretical knowledge, but that can be adapt, and that they will show skills and practical experience and a deep understanding of the real world complexities. So the positive change that we are looking for is not merely going to come from tweaking what we are already doing, but I think we're at a point where we fundamentally need to reimagine work-integrated learning within the current higher education landscape and the future that we aspire to create. So the burning platform to start off most probably is looking at today's workplace requirements, that extensively also focuses on almost what we used to call the soft skills, leadership, teamwork, compassion, creative problem solving, and the interpersonal communication. And therefore, how universities need to reposition ourselves to work with industry, with our partners, to embrace this in terms of navigating the future.
Hester, I think that you've laid the word for me. I think reimagining is easy to say and so difficult to actually apply, but I'm going to actually keep that theme and just revert back to that after a while. Prof. Gary Martin from Perth, your thoughts on what the burning issue is for us under education?
Good morning. For me, one of the things that I think needs to be clarified up front is this idea of the job-ready graduate. I think calling our graduates job-ready for a start, or trying to produce job-ready graduates, is actually something that actually works against us, because universities' roles are not solely to produce graduates that are job-ready. No amount of work that universities do will produce a job-ready graduate, because universities are focused on critical thinking, curiosity, lifelong learning. That has to stay, and that's an important driver in universities. We can't say then that when someone completes a degree or qualification, they're job ready. There needs to be a lot more work done once in the workplace. So by talking about job ready graduates, we're actually setting ourselves up for failure, I think. So we need to rethink what we're actually saying here, because we want graduates to be prepared to work, but a lot of the work in terms of developing skills comes through extended experience in the workplace. So for me, trying to understand what we actually mean by job ready is something that is pivotal to solving the challenges.
Gary, thank you so much for your perspective on that. And again, already reimagining the answer even to the challenge ahead of us. Naomi Graham from Edinburgh, you woke up this morning, and what are some of your thoughts around the future of education and its reshaping?
Thank you, Zanel, and hi, everybody. I'm just so delighted to join the panel this morning. I think I've been really struck, listening to the two speakers. First, just how this is so very much a global challenge, although local issues in terms of industry needs, like the context might be different, but wherever we sit in the world, we are struggling with these issues. One thing I would really like to explore in our session this morning is how we can collaborate, pool our resources, and really bring together best practice in order to scale up some of what we're doing. So I don't think we can tackle this individually, or we can't do that to produce the best outcomes. We need to work together. So really, what are the models for collaboration, and how can we do that at scale?
And the problem is huge enough to say it's not for one team to solve, but a network in a very interconnected global world. So a very interesting perspective. Thank you for throwing that into the pot this morning. Sweta Wahi, all the way from Dubai. Your thoughts today?
Thank you, and a very good afternoon/morning from Dubai. It's just such an honor to be here right now, and I do agree with Naomi. I love the perspectives that have been expressed so far. We're hearing themes of collaboration, the importance of stakeholders coming in, getting their buy-in to truly integrate work experience into curriculum. But I think the burning issue for me, and this is in line with Gary's words as well, it's really just teaching our students and our youth to stay relevant. A careers hub is not a placement hub, and it is not the responsibility of the university to just get a student a job at the end of it. And you can put all the opportunities in the world together and hire the best coaches and integrate curriculum in and industry relevance learning into curriculum. But if you don't show your students how to stay relevant and how to stay resilient, be really succeeding. And it's also about building that habit of upskilling and reskilling and lifelong learning. And what happens when you don't get a job? What happens when you get your first rejection? How do you cope with unemployment, my apologies, and turn it into fun employment without losing focus on what you're trying to achieve? So it's really just about teaching students that resilience. That's the turning point for me.
And Sweta, their world has changed so fundamentally in the last 10 years, in the last decade, in the last 2 decades. So it really requires even the individuals and the students themselves to just have such a different perspective of entering the world. So I love your perspectives. And now let's go over to Professor Simon Guy from Lancaster.
Yes, and hello everybody. And just to repeat again, what a pleasure, privilege to join this brilliant panel. And often you say it's a really bad thing to go last, but it's been great to hear the perspectives of fellow panelists. And I can't agree with any of the comments that have been made so far. I think this is about reimagining, but we shouldn't lose the kind of value and quality of universities. It's not about universities simply becoming businesses. I think we need to collaborate with business and identify what work-ready graduates really means. As Gary suggested, it's not necessarily having the particular technical skills or disciplinary or professional skills, a particular role. It's the kind of graduate attributes that we need to be within our universities. I think that's when I talk to businesses, talk about It's not that they, for instance, can't find people who can do the technical work of accountancy, for instance, but they are looking for people who can be mentally agile, who are resilient, are financially literate, and are culturally intelligent, picking up the point about this being a global challenge and the need for collaboration. So I think the space that we really need to be exploring now is that space in between business and university. Arguably in the past, they've been separate, too separate. Now they need to kind of come together and define that space of kind of graduate attributes that are required to be successful in the modern world, in the modern global world.
And that's quite, I think that's interesting. For me, it sort of wraps up the entire challenge itself, is that we are talking about a gap between the institutions and what businesses are requiring and what students need in order to be successful. This is a gap that's existed since the beginning of education. But I think I want to go back and I want to pose it to Hester. Fundamentally, the need to change or the opportunity, is there an opportunity to look at the fundamentals of curricula, of content that previously could be kept for 20 years, but now with the faster pace of change, are we called upon as institutions to make sure that our content is relevant? What are your thoughts, Hester?
Well, I think that's exactly the challenge for universities, is that there are some basic some basic content that one wants to ensure, and that is what the essence of universities are about. We should never ignore the fact that often the research and what we teach is not only about the content for a specific profession, but it is also about preparing our students for life. The same for research. We should not ignore that often it is good to have research just for the sake of research. That's what university is about. It's the discovery of knowledge. Yet, if we then look at the challenge of unemployment and youth, and especially on the continent of Africa, it's evident that we can't continue exactly down that path anymore. So what possibilities would be, and of course we are doing some of those, is then to engage with where our students are placed for work, where they take up employment with industry. And it implies that industry actually become now part of the co-creation of knowledge and curricula specifically to understand what is the needs. Because it doesn't help that universities continue to teach what we teach in terms of our curricula, but then ultimately it is not what the workplace requires. So in moving forward, I think it's going to be an extremely sensitive balancing act to not give up the essence of universities and what we stand for, and of course the public good of universities, but balancing that with what are the needs within industry and within workplace. And that is, it speaks to the point that some of my panelists has already raised, and that is the collaboration. So often what we find is that universities often, almost in an isolated space, and working, for example, with community-based colleges, with the further education colleges, and pulling in industry partners in that will most probably be the answer for the future. So it's the collaboration in the broader higher education sector that is also important, because it doesn't mean universities need to do this all on our own. It could be in collaboration with then partners that are usually very good at workplace or work-based integration of those opportunities within curricula. Often see that it's exactly within our TVET sector that they are very good at doing this. And that's the other challenge now for universities, typically looking, for example, at a law degree, where it was very theoretical based. Now all of a sudden, so how do we prepare our students when they get into practice after completing a law degree to have some work readiness? And yeah, so it's my sense now is to embrace the co-creation of curricula, in partnership. It's working with other partners in the system, but then also understanding what are the demands within workplace work-based placements, and to get our students ready for taking up employment.
Professor Klopper, thank you so much for, I think, putting all the elements together that would work together for that. And we wanna put the microscope on that and challenge it a bit more. Prof. Martin, you spoke very clearly that the universities should still not forget the role that they play. So what are your thoughts on what is required to create depth of learning in a program versus the pressures we are hearing to look at the curriculum and to look at the student and say, what are we preparing them for? It's not an easy balance to achieve.
No, I don't think it is. I think there's some real challenge, but I believe that the idea of co-creation, co-design of curriculum is vital. In the past, what some universities have done is said they're collaborating with industry, but that was really consulting with industry, talking to industry, but not necessarily co-designing or collaborating. I mean, consulting is different to collaboration. So I think what we're going to see next is universities sitting down with their academics at the table, people from workforce communities at the table, talking about content, talking about the case studies that might be included in materials, talking about the types of assessment and whether they reflect what happens in workplaces, involving industry more in guest lectures, those sorts of things, but also then extending that out with work integrated learning. So I think it's kind of broadening out this idea of consultation to true co-design, which involves considerable collaboration, not just consulting.
And now I think I'm getting a much clearer picture, and so we're getting a clearer picture of where the opportunities lie to strengthen the curriculum itself. But Sweta, over to you. The world is also asking for such a variety and a blow-up of learning methodologies. What are your thoughts on curriculum, and which types of curriculum are you seeing serving the youth of tomorrow?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. We've got a few from represented at the panel today. I think with the various education systems that I've been exposed to over the past decade or so, I would note personally that Canada and Australia have very strong work integrated learning models, where internships, apprenticeships, and industry supported project-based learning are recognized and actually rewarded credit. Now, if you look at the mindset of the average undergraduate student that comes into university, and I do say this in a very qualitative way, the focus is not on going out and building work experience or getting a job that contributes to a qualitative careers development learning experience. It's more about attending classes, passing exams, project work, and of course, the informal university experience, making friends, clubs and societies, and just enjoying university life in general. So students who generally go out and work during university time would be those who need to pay for school or then may have financial difficulties. And in those roles that they're taking on, the focus is not on the learning, but on funding their education or living expenses, right? So when students are formally guided into exploring the world of work and credits are actually awarded for it, there's a change in perspective, where students are then looking at the work experience that they're carrying out very differently. And if I can just use our partners in Dubai as an example, in Australia, every faculty at Curtin University has its own work integrated learning team. And there is some form of industry involvement in the curriculum in every program that we offer at the Dubai campus right now. So just for example, our business program, we have a unit called the business internship, where a senior student has to undertake work experience through their study period and goes through that process of self-discovery in a careers context. They put in about 120 odd hours of work, and they actually then get evaluated on their work from their line manager and by their faculty member. And then they earn that credit towards their degree. So it's a great example that we could all learn from.
I like this so much. Thank you. And I think that it's leading me on to the next question as well. But I want to really stay with the curriculum. So I want to ask Prof. Gary Martin to lean in on that. And before you do, I just want to apologize for the technical problems we might be having this morning. Do stay with us. It'll get smoother as we go along. Prof. Martin, your thoughts on the curriculum itself and what is the work that's required to reshape it for the youth of the future and those who are needing to find an easier, smoother path into the corporate environment?
I think this has already been touched on. I think Guy mentioned it, but I thought it was to do with graduate attributes. I think what's really important is when we do have qualifications developed, we need to go back and at those qualifications against a set of graduate attributes that employers would value. And I'm talking about communication, critical thinking, digital literacy, global cultural awareness, and generally ethical reasoning, integrity, those sorts of things. So in the course of a degree, yes, of course, the work integrated learning is important, but how do we then do an audit to make sure the entire degree or across an entire degree program that our course is aligned with those type of attributes? And I think sometimes it's a bit hit and miss, but if we start to map out what employers want against what's in a curriculum already or what's developed by a curriculum, we'll see where the gaps are. And once we see where the gaps are, we're able to address some of those shortfalls.
Thank you, Prof. Martin. I must have come back to you there. Thank you for catching my question. I want to take that same question, throw it to Professor Guy. Prof, we are looking at content, we are looking at curriculum, and we're seeing a lot of influence coming into it. What are your thoughts on the reshaping of curriculum in the institutions?
Yeah, can I give you a couple of examples from the Lancaster University kind of global network we have? Because we have a number of kind of international partner campuses around the world. The first example I want to give you is actually a little bit more local. We set up about 7 or 8 years ago now a new university in Manchester, University Academy 92, very innovative, and it was a joint venture with the ex-Manchester United football players, Gary Neville. And so some of you football fans may recognize that name. And the idea around this university was precisely to both be industry facing, but also to foreground not just the disciplinary requirements to get a Lancaster degree, but also exactly those kind of attributes that Gary has just been talking about. So the football players are known as the class of 92. So right the way through all of the degree programs offered at University Academy 92 is the 92 program. And that 92 program focuses on exactly those softer kind of personal attributes that are so key to be, using that phrase again, work ready, not the disciplinary skills, but the kind of wider personal skills. And this is not an optional course. This is someone that everyone joins UA 92 will do, whether they're doing sport or media or business, they will all go through the 92 program. So what defines a UA 92 graduate at the end is the quality that they've achieved to deserve a Lancaster University degree, which is the same quality standards that we hold at our main Bellrig campus. But also they will have qualified through the 92 program to show and be able to evidence that they have these wider cultural kind of personal attributes that define the UA 92 experience. So that's a kind of a new approach, a startup university. We started with a blank piece of paper, which is a lot easier than trying to change the institutions that many of us work in that have been around for quite a number of years now. So the change program is much harder there. The other example I want to give you, keeping the international theme, comes from Malaysia. We've had a 20-year relationship with Sunway University in Kuala Lumpur. And Sunway University is very dedicated to developing kind of entrepreneurial mindset. So one of those key attributes we've been talking about. And they've set up something they call the Innovation Lab. where many universities have these innovation labs where people can take kind of ideas for startups, etc. What's very interesting about what Sunway have done, though, they've created a module on entrepreneurial mindset and skills. This is not an optional mindset. This is actually compulsory. So every student at Sunway, and we currently have 8,000 students doing joint Sunway and Lancaster degrees, and I think there's about 12,000 overall in the university at the moment. Every student, whether they're doing arts or sciences or business, will do this module on entrepreneurial mindset and skills. So what defines the students coming out with joint Sunway and Lancaster degrees from Malaysia is that they will all have evidence and pass this module on entrepreneurship and skills. I think that's another example of moving beyond just having things as kind of optional, maybe influenced by the outside world, but making it core to the university. So I hope that's helpful.
It's actually leading me into Naomi. Naomi, you must be itching to come in on this one because it speaks to global partnerships. It speaks to best practice. But I want you to lean in as well on how have you seen curriculum influenced by the big ask from how the world is changing and what organizations are needing graduates to bring. In your experience as you've traveled and pulled all this strategic thinking, what are your thoughts on curriculum?
Absolutely, Daniel. So thank you for bringing me in. I think in terms of we've touched quite a lot on work-based learning, and I think it's really core to kind of integrate within the curriculum, and that's something we've been doing for a long time at Edinburgh Napier. I think that's really our kind of background as an institution. We are very applied. We have 95% of our programs have a work-based learning element integrated into that. And we do that through very established industrial advisory boards, where we bring in employers and we co-create in terms of the curriculum, but we also use them in terms of that horizon scanning, understanding what's going on in terms of future skills gaps. We've developed a strong suite of graduate apprenticeship programs where companies sort of release employees for 20% of the time, and they do that combination of study and work. So that works well. But in terms of another example, I guess in terms of collaboration. So I think we've talked about the rise of AI, data. That's something that's happening here in Scotland. So there's a real rise and need for graduates to have data skills across lots of disciplines. And the Scottish Government recently surveyed employers, and 82% of them said that they weren't able to really recruit the graduates that they needed. So we've actually been collaborating with the other 3 universities in Edinburgh on a project, the Data Skills Gateway, which has got sort of 3 strands to it. So firstly, it's around developing new degrees that meet those needs. But secondly, it's about embedding data skills into degree programs right across different disciplines. So that includes areas such as nursing. So we're putting data skills into the first year of our we've done this in our nursing program. So nurses, going out on community health placements, are working with real life data, and they're getting those skills that they need in terms of that future workplace. But it's about facilitating placements. And I think if you can collaborate across a number of universities, it's easier to do that. So that's an example from Scotland. I think what I'm interested in then is how you could scale that up and bring in other partners, or maybe use those models in other parts of the world.
Thank you so much. And it really paints a very different picture because we're focusing on career hubs. We're looking at skills and their transference from the institution into the workplace. Perhaps, Professor, you can also lean into what does it look like in action to collaborate? What does it look like in action for universities and for institutions that hire our candidates?
So I'm going to go back to the theme that I started off. It's also about the reimagination of what these partnership characteristics looks like. Now that we engage with industry, with workplace, or opportunities where we can have the work-based placements. And I want to tie up with what Naomi has also mentioned. Part of this partnerships is to look at what is scalable and how we can actually sustain it across diverse economic contexts. But let me delve into what I think is some aspects in terms of the reimagination of these partnership characteristics. And the first is critical that we see in practice is that it must be a shared responsibility and almost a shared authority. So genuine collaboration, curriculum development, and also looking at the pedagogy of how we actually teach our students. The second principle is around the mutual investment that is needed. And this is, of course, that all of the partners needs to have this commitment. So it's moving from what I would call transactional relationships to really transformational type of relationships. And it's not just building those relationships for a specific period, but it's building relationships now on a much longer, long-term basis. The third point that I want to highlight in terms of these reimagined type of partnerships is the academic role evolution that we see. And this is where faculty members are now not just only the teaching and the sharing of information, but are really becoming the facilitators of the knowledge and how they bridge that gap into some of working then with our partners into the workplace learning. So the shift that we are seeing is that we are no longer, as faculty members, only what I would refer to knowledge vendors, but it's really this transformational partnership. The fifth or the fourth point that I want to highlight is, this also brings challenges for universities internally, where we now need to look at, so what organizational developments is needed within the university to prepare our university, our faculty members to embrace this new way of mentoring capacity.
Prof. Klopper, I'm so sorry. Your Zoom seems to be breaking up there and it's just getting worse. So we're just going to take a bit of a pause, but continue the conversation. I really appreciated what you said around the whole entire institution having to go through that change. And while institutions are changing, many are also operating globally. Prof. Martin, you are dealing with so many institutions across the continent. Can you pull up some best practice or trends that you are seeing that really work well in the various regions that you operate within when it comes to career hubs and integration into workforce?
By far the most successful and effective way of integrating learning or integrating workplace learning into university curriculum that I've ever seen is work-based projects. And those are where a group of students based in a university are asked to respond to a workplace issue, challenge, or opportunity. Academics guide that process, and towards the end of a unit or module, there's a presentation back to someone from the workplace. And I think it combines the best of both worlds, because students are given opportunities to solve or respond to a challenge that is real, and employers at the other end get to see students in action. And I think that is probably the best I've ever seen it. I know that other panelists have referred to that. And the reason I say that also is because sometimes when we talk about university internships, they're not always shaped up to what we think they might be. In other words, students are put into an intern role and they're basically given the jobs that everyone else doesn't want to do in a workplace. And while that's useful to a certain extent, they don't necessarily tackle the real workplace issues. The other thing I wanted to say briefly is I must apologise to Professor Guy, who I called Guy before, but it's actually Simon. And what I wanted to say to him, though, being in a different country, in Australia, people have been talking about degree apprenticeships as the model to embrace here in Australia, but so far there's been little uptake, and I'm still puzzled as to why that might be the case.
I think we'll give him a chance to answer that in just a moment. I'm also my interest is also piqued there. But before I go through, there's something else you spoke about. I mean, work-based internships or work-based learning. Shweta, your thoughts, because you also drive a passion for integrating businesses into corporate. It requires a lot of courage. Have you seen organizations really take up the challenge to help to upskill graduates whilst they're studying?
Thank you for that question and bringing me in, because I have so much to say at this point. I'll just start with, the fact that, everyone's pointed out that there are light ways to get industry involved, through having them come in through these mentorship programs, or let's say you could also do simple in-classroom talks. You could have students working on capstone projects, advisory boards, as Naomi mentioned as well. And if done right, academic and corporate partnerships can truly be very fruitful. But the real principle here is that they have to be mutually beneficial. Now, with us as STAG, we were in a very interesting space because we actually were able to start with that blank sheet of paper when we set up each campus. When we set up, the proof of concept really at the end of the day is getting students placed or having them study on further. So the lowest hanging fruit for us at that point was to build out our own internship program, which still runs to date. So whether it's at Lancaster University in Accra in Ghana, or even over here in Dubai, every student can actually go in and interview with the Careers Hub. And as and when there are internship opportunities, they can get placed within departments at the university. But it doesn't just stop there. What we noticed at that point was that, it's not about just coming in and having those mundane tasks being carried out. Department managers and our heads of schools, in general, the entire ecosystem within both our campuses, they all go beyond and try to provide a solid learning experience for these interns. And it takes significant time and effort. And one also has to be mindful that work still needs to get done. So it's a balancing act, right? And so when we talk about that mutual benefit to the student and the employer, we've done it because we're bought in, we have that reason to get these students placed, give them that experience, and then send them out into thriving careers. But it's not the case with external industry partners. So having gone through that exercise and seen both sides, we then reached out to all our contacts in industry and conducted local studies to see what are their pain points. Why are they hesitant to hire part-time students in internships or even fresh graduates? And after identifying those gaps, we then worked to kind of fill them back in. And it very much does tie into these skills that I think was mentioned earlier, the softer skills, the presentation skills, just the ability to speak professionally, communication, professional etiquette when it comes to email writing, various topics like that. And then we've actually incorporated them into the Careers Hub at both campuses. So quite an operational response, but that's been our strategy so far, and we've found that it has worked. We've just focused on the process with the students in terms of the opportunities that have been given to them, and we found that both campuses have maintained high placement rates, and that's just been an outcome of the effort.
Thank you so much. And I think we did need to do that. We did need to just really get into the granular aspects of what that integration looks like. But then it probably also helps us to focus, because as institutions, while we do that, the content of what we teach and the depth of the knowledge still remains so important. Prof. Martin, I don't know if you want to lean into the previous conversation, but I need you to also take a little bit of a skip for us and say, we're also in the digital revolution. We're in the age of AI. Does AI come in, and have you found opportunities universities where AI is perhaps enabling us to bridge the gap?
Yeah, I mean, in Australia, I think universities generally have not integrated enough AI into the curriculum. So it might be used, for example, to generate an assignment, perhaps not always in the right way by students, but it's not being used extensively by academics. So in a course, even in a business course, it's not being used here in Australia to teach students how they can actually use AI with applications in the workplace. And I think we're falling behind the times rapidly because graduates who you think that perhaps a younger generation will come out AI ready are still not coming out AI ready. As things go through in the workplace, we ran a senior executive forum here and we asked people in that forum, the senior leaders, who was using AI, and about maybe an eighth of the participants were actually using AI. Now, these are senior leaders. They need the graduates from universities to come through and to use AI or to bring AI into the workplace. But that won't happen unless universities are using AI in lots of different ways in everyday courses to simulate how you might use AI in a real workplace.
And I keep on coming to you and wanting to be saying Prof. Simon as well. I don't know what is going on with me, but Professor Guy, your thoughts on that as well. And I think Professor Martin really laid the groundwork for us. But what do you think of the integration of AI into solving for this gap and maybe helping us to leap a bigger step than what we could have without it?
Okay, and this is very much a personal view on AI. I think AI reveals some of the challenge to universities, and I think at the moment we're collectively failing. I'm not a specialist in AI, but my sense of the development of the field is the advances are not happening within universities in general, they're happening within industry, and universities are lagging behind. And then the debate within universities is very polarized. So either universities are treating AI as a kind of existential threat, a kind of shortcut, for students to cheat more easily. And so we spend our time somehow trying to defend ourselves against AI, or we see it as the salvation. We're all under pressure now financially to be more efficient. And the shortcut to that is often AI will solve everything. We're just going to automate everything. And we make a lot of plans around that. And so I think the challenge for universities is they need to kind of catch up and become part of the conversation and research effort around AI in partnership with industry. And then we need a much more sophisticated, nuanced understanding of the potential for AI within the universities as neither simply threat or salvation, but as yet another technology that we need to harness or be left behind.
Thank you for that. And I think that we'll probably infuse AI a little bit more in our conversations. But I also want to just go to one of the questions we've got from our viewers. There's so many interesting ones, really hard for me to choose. But Shannon, maybe you can help me to respond to this one. We talked a little bit about the current format. We're talking about the evolution of the workspace, the institutions, the university institutions, and then the place of work. And I've also got a question around, even from a school leaver's perspective, are we looking at integrating even at that level? But a question that I've got here looks at evolution and where there's a need maybe to probably focus. Are we looking at going back into specialized technical fields such as medicine and engineering, and other disciplines like marketing, law, and humanities and human resources could possibly shift to alternative learning formats? So quite an interesting question is, should universities, or do universities see the appetite for strengthening the formal, the more technical disciplines, and some should actually see a different way that's probably based in a more integrated way with institutions? Olivia Kern asked that question. I hope that I've done justice to it. Shannon, your thoughts on that? Sorry, Professor Naomi.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an incredibly interesting question, and probably, yeah, probably the next kind of 5 to 10 years, this will evolve. I think, we are seeing some shifts in terms of student demand, away from, some of the areas where we've been talking about AI, where AI is having quite a transformative impact in terms of the job market. And I think we can see that in terms of student decision making. And I think for us as universities, again, it goes back to this point about how we can really um, quickly enough embed these core competencies and skills into the curriculum to make sure that our students are ready, to go into the workplace. But that it also kind of continues to develop and move on. So yes, I think it's a very interesting one, but I can't I can't see that shift happening probably in the next kind of couple of years. It's probably a bit more long term.
And it's an interesting question. I wonder, it's not one we've actually considered into the dynamic of, are there some that should be leaving the university space, and should we be having different formats to what we do? But I think the biggest challenge we have is access. Before we even think about the separation, is access to education for as many youth as possible in a country where I know we are constrained in terms of the number of institutions that are available for the number of graduates or students leaving high school. We just don't have enough. So I want to go back to the question around AI again. Prof. Klopper, do you see AI solving for that? Distance learning, bringing rural communities, integrating the whole of the continent for educational opportunities?
Well, I would rather say that it is the use of technology as a broad base of providing access. And of course, on the continent of Africa, part of our challenge is the digital divide that we're seeing, those that are having access. And hopefully, we would need to keep our thoughts around, and as we look into the future, to make sure that those that don't have access are not left behind. So there's other challenges on our continent. But let me get to the core of your question, and that is: so should we embrace the technology and the AI? I think it's one opportunity that we should embrace. Typically, what we've seen here at University of the Free State, universities often manage complexities with let's look at what a policy should be. And for the first time, we see that you can't put a policy in place for AI. It is so moving, it is so quickly developing. So one rather starts speaking about what are the guidelines, what are the principles that we should embrace, instead of, so there's a policy that will guide this. So, even in the way that at universities we think around this and how we think around governance is changing. And so, yes, I absolutely believe that embracing technology and AI, if we ensure that there are equal access and it doesn't create a broader divide in terms of those who have access to the technology platforms, that it is an opportunity to use for access to education. Typically, one would, and you started off at the beginning to speak about, and our keynote speaker also spoke about, so micro-credentialing, staggering. So it's a different way of looking at our offerings at universities. But I also want to tie up on the question that you raised, or one of the listeners was asking, is, so are we going back to more of a technical orientated type of training? And I would want to say, I hope universities don't only do that, because what I see in the workplace is really students that are prepared and are geared towards more transdisciplinary approaches in the workplace. So you can't just train a nurse or a physiotherapist or a doctor, but it's how they work within teams, how they work together. What are those skills that are needed to work in those team-based approaches? So the answer for me would not be reverting back to very technical, although there are in some places space for that. but it's more about these competencies that we also need to look at around transdisciplinary workplaces, team-based learning, etc. But yes, embracing technology and embracing AI in its fullest extent as a tool to enhance our work.
Thank you so much. Shweta, did you listen to that answer? And I want to throw it back at you as well. The idea that some programs, and we do have a comment similar to that, Marina Hall here in South Africa has sent us a comment. She says many degrees don't have work integrated learning programs. So engineering, for example, wouldn't have, but fine arts does have. So what you find that there's rampant unemployment because in the marketplace, many graduates who don't have work integrated learning find themselves uncompetitive. An advert comes out asking by employers for applicants, but they say 2 years work experience required for internships or junior roles. So how can, in your views, Shweta, how can graduates do it for themselves? How can they, where there isn't an opportunity, what are some of the creative ways in which one can find opportunities to grow one's experience in order to get into something that's already an internship?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because this is one of the challenges that we struggle with every day when we have employers that approach our careers hub asking for students, presenting us with JDs that are essentially full-time roles and asking for interns who have 5 years of work experience in XYZ skill sets. And fact is that it is very competitive. That's just the way things are. And this is something we tell our students every day, that you've gotten into an amazing university. You're going to have access to all these amazing resources. You will graduate with a good degree, but how do you keep up? What happens when you leave? And it's not an answer that can be responded to simply. It's highly nuanced. But I think what students need to do is understand that you're not going to get all the answers just from the degree. You have to take advantage of all the services that are available to you. And that does include going out and meeting with the careers hub in your university. And I am speaking once again in a very operational sense, bringing it down into just the mindset of a student when they come in. But I do want to address one point that is something that I'm sure all of us have dealt with in our own university settings. You can perhaps even have everyone's buy-in and everyone might be working well together. Stakeholders are coming to the party. You're being able to put together various industry relevant experiences or whatever else it may be. But you can bring a horse to water, right? You can't necessarily get students to engage the way they need to. And I think that's something that all of us need to think about, because students may not be thinking about these issues when they join university, and they may just disengage, and they may not understand that right now they have that gift of time. They have that ability to go out and get the help that they need. Also, cold calling and reaching out to employers as a student, you're more likely to get responded to. Whereas once you graduate, you're less likely to be heard. And so I think that's something we all do need to think about. It's engaging the student from the first day and kind of helping them to go beyond the classroom and the expectations of what they might be receiving through their study.
Shweta, I'm cutting out just that piece for my own daughter who's going into university soon, because you keep on talking about the mindset of the student. And sometimes we're tackling a big problem and then we find a small gem that we could focus on. Because if you fix just that, now you have somebody who's solving for themselves for their entire career. So I think that's actually quite an important point. And I want to carry it over again. Prof. Guy, lean a little bit into the question as well. But I've got one that I want to throw you away from Mwai Mpingajira. And Mwai says that how can the curriculums better prepare students for jobs that don't exist yet, especially with the rise of automation and the world changing so deeply. reflecting back on what you've said earlier on, the institution has a role to play, but the future beckons. How are you then building the bridge again between today's thinking and what the future is asking for as an output from institutions?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a complex challenge, but it's the kind of challenge that universities are very distinctively set up to meet. And if we can't meet that challenge as universities, then I think we have a problem justifying our existence to a degree. And I think the answer to it has to be very multi-layered. And it partly connects to some of the other conversations about AI as simply a technical skill. Actually, AI is a skill for life, isn't it? For everybody, it can be used in so many different ways. And so we need to be equipping all our students, I think, with those kinds of AIs and necessary technology skills for whatever they do professionally, but also personally in kind of life, that kind of digital fluency kind of more generally. And I think actually the role of universities is not simply the students that we have with us now. It's about preparing the generation coming into universities. And here I want to give a shout out to the work that's going on at Lancaster University, Ghana. And I think already the fairly newly established Emerging Technologies Centre that's been set up at Lancaster University, Ghana, very distinctive, if not unique at the moment in the sector, which obviously is a fantastic resource for our students. But actually, at Lancaster University, Ghana, we're now using that for high school students to bridge their skills. So the university is putting on kind of weekend immersive emerging technology weekend, bringing in high school students to teach them the basics of coding, of robotics, using kind of virtual reality, etc. So they start to think of those skills very early on, and that's not related to any particular discipline. These are just more general academic and kind of life skills. So I think it starts there. We've talked a lot about engaging out with business, but another example I'd like to share, and I'm sure many universities also do this, is we invite business and business people into the university. So our management school has an Entrepreneurs in Residence program, in which we invite people to spend successful entrepreneurs to give up a day a week for a fixed kind of period to come and actually operate within the university, to give them the opportunity to meet the people who are doing research on the cutting edge, but to share their views as well with students and staff and researchers to make sure that the work that we're doing is relevant, both the future-orientated research work, but also the educational work we're doing with students. So I think this is a challenge at the moment. There isn't just a kind of one-way direction. We need to be moving in this direction. This is multiple layered, really. We need to be reaching out, bringing people in, looking into the future, but also looking into those early years as well and trying to play a role there.
Thank you so much, Prof. Guy. Naomi, I want to just end off with you a little bit. We've had quite a lot of thoughts. Your final thoughts before we close off our hour?
Yeah, I think it's been a fantastic conversation, and we've had so many really good insights. So I think that final thought is just around that transformation that's needed, and how we can collaborate together to really deliver at scale. I think that's the core of the challenge that faces us as a sector.
Thank you so much. Deliver at scale, taking everybody's expertise and insights as to what really works well, and multiplying that across collaborative partners. I definitely feel there's a lot of work to do in just that piece. But thank you so much once again for your insights. Thank you for your contribution, and wishing you all the best in the work that lies ahead. As Professor Guy said, it is multi-pronged. There's a lot to do, but everything should deliver towards the future that we need. So I want to say thank you to Prof. Hester Klopper from Bloemfontein, Professor Gary Martin from Perth, Naomi Graham from Edinburgh, Sweta Wahi from Dubai, and Professor Simon Guy from Lancaster. I'm going to see you again later on today for another panel discussion, and this one is going to be industry integrated curriculum, alternative learning pathways in teaching and learning.